Hello, welcome to my channel and another reaction video. This time we'll be checking out the video The Chimeran War for game Resistance by Templin Institute.
By the mid-1930s, it had become obvious to the nations of Europe that something was deeply wrong within Russia. While it had successfully defeated the Bolshevik Revolution more than a decade earlier, the Russian Empire had seemingly never recovered, and the entire nation had retreated into a self-imposed isolation, driven, it was said, by the increasing paranoia of the Tsar. With strange broadcasts and reports intercepted from deep within the country, it was suspected that this isolation might have been intended to conceal a general mobilization, and the United European Defense, or UED, was established in response.
Little did they know
A
what
clearer
was
picture
lurking
began
there.
to come together of what was truly happening inside Russia. Entire villages and then towns had been abandoned, and strange creatures, believed to have been the result of a Russian experiment gone wrong, were spotted across the country. When war finally came, the full scale of the UED's miscalculations were made clear. The creatures that would become known as the Chimera were not born of any experiment, or even Earth itself, and they came not to conquer, but to exterminate. The Chimeran War would determine not the fate of nations, but the survival of mankind
I
itself.
probably should have watched this first before I watched the Chimera video,
the
which
Chimera
pretty
had
much
been
explained
confined
the
to Russia, in part because the
Chimeras
nation's
as the
Arctic
name
climate
suggests.
perfectly suited their physiology, but also
Terraforming.
because of the Red Curtain, an enormous fortification stretching from the Baltic Sea in the north to the Black Sea in the south. Despite their preparations, when the Chimera overcame the final remnants of the Russian Imperial Army and breached the wall in December 1949, the United European Defense fell apart almost immediately. The Chimera's numerical and technological superiority were their most obvious advantages over the UED, but the speed with which they advanced across Europe was unprecedented. Any static lines of defense were overrun or circumvented entirely. By January 1950, the Baltic states, Poland, and much of the Balkans were simply gone. The rest of Europe was stretched to the limits in trying to accommodate the enormous number of refugees who had fled westwards, trying to stay ahead of the Chimera's advance. Startlingly, almost no refugees escaped from territories that had already fallen to the Chimera. Only 2,000 survivors managed to escape from Warsaw when it fell, a city of roughly 2 million people. This was later realized to be the result of the Chimeran's conversion process, which transformed captured men and women into horrific creatures or biomechanical machines. Even German panzer divisions were helpless when facing the
It's so
increasingly
cool how
advanced mechanized
the
weapons
Chimera
utilized by the
use
Chimera.
technology and
In a desperate attempt to
cybernetic
prevent the Chimera
enhancements.
from reaching the refugee camps established on the banks of the Rhine, the German army adopted a complete scorched earth policy, destroying anything that might be of value to the Chimera. Unfortunately, they remained ignorant to the fact the Chimera had no need for human industry and resources, apart from human bodies themselves. When the futility of the struggle was finally realized, plans were made to evacuate Germany and the rest of Europe, though many of these efforts would be swept up by the enemy, condemning millions to the horrific conversion process utilized by the Chimera. In only 2 months, most of Europe had been defeated utterly, with the last line of defense centered on the mountains of northern Italy. With the knowledge of what was happening in the rest of the continent, hundreds of Italian soldiers committed suicide rather than becoming part of what they called the Deathless Plague. When Genoa was finally taken, Italian resistance ended completely.
I think a lot of
For 9 months, hope remained that the United
people
Kingdom might
would
remain
choose
free of
death
the
over
Chimera,
becoming
and perhaps become a staging
monster.
ground for some great counterattack. In
But do
October
the Chimera
1950,
need the
however,
humans to be
the
alive
Chimera
for them to
crossed the
do
Channel,
their
having
shit?
secretly tunneled beneath it.
Mm.
The British Army fared no better than their counterparts on the continent. The primary British headquarters in London was flooded by Chimeran creatures, and its 14,000-man garrison was trapped and left to die. With this, the tattered remnants of the British military retreated from the cities, intending to wage a guerrilla campaign until reinforcements from the United States could arrive. In July 1951, after months of negotiations, a joint British-American strike on London, named Operation Morningstar, successfully destroyed an enormous Chimeran tower, skyscraper-sized structures raised in every territory conquered by the Chimera. The London Tower in particular seemed to be at the center of some type of Chimeran network, and with its destruction, every Chimeran creature across the British Isles died en masse. Among the most important intelligence gained during the operation was the knowledge that the Chimeran towers seemed to have been excavated rather than constructed, and could be the key to their defeat.
Oh, right. Yeah. They were
With the defeat of the Chimera in Britain,
underneath
the British
this.
military was contacted by the Maquis, a resistance organization gathered from the remnants of the UED. They intended to replicate the success of Operation Morningstar and destroy a Chimeran network centered in Paris. A method of resisting the Chimera's conversion process was discovered during the campaign, and together with the destruction of the Paris hub tower, delivered to the Chimera the largest decisive defeat since the start of the war. The Maquis and their British allies pushed onward into Russia, hoping to find some secret that might reverse their fortune. Ultimately, the respite gained here was short-lived. The Chimera had developed new conversion methods, and worse yet, began constructing fleets of battleships intended to reach the yet unconquered nations across the Atlantic and Pacific Oceans. In August 1951, the Chimera invaded Canada and the United States, testing local resistance with small-scale yet highly damaging strikes. President Noah Grace, believing a military victory to be impossible, enacted Project Omega, a top-secret contingency plan that proposed negotiating a truce with the Chimera, sacrificing the rest of the planet if the United States were left in peace. The plan hinged on a Chimeran entity known as Daedalus, the only creature yet encountered capable of high-level communication. Despite its capture, Daedalus was only amused by the proposal, and President Grace was later executed for his betrayal of mankind. Prepared to make a final stand in the heart of the country, the United States constructed the Liberty Defense Perimeter, a safe zone in the nation's interior surrounded by heavily armed defense towers. Between 1952 and 1953, the Chimera overcame their natural inability to survive in higher temperatures and swept through Africa and Asia. As in Europe, they unearthed enormous towers and herded the surviving population into vast conversion centers. The Royal Navy managed to evacuate roughly 170,000 civilians, with the rest left to fend for themselves. Additional attacks occurred in South America and Australia, and every city with a population over 100,000 was targeted for conversion. In May 1953, the final campaign of the war began when the enormous Chimeran warships constructed across the conquered territories of the world arrived on both coasts of the United States. Resistance to the invasion lasted only 8 days before the Liberty Defense Perimeter was breached, and the 80 million people trapped within it were killed. In one last desperate gambit, remnants of the American military attempted to destroy the Chimeran fleet which had gathered over the Chicxulub crater in Mexico. The detonation of an atomic bomb annihilated many of the Armada's warships, and Daedalus himself was killed in the attack. But the explosion had the unintended effect of opening a direct rift to the Chimera's homeworld. By 1957, 90% of the human population had been killed or converted, and any semblance of organized military resistance was over, and with it, the Chimeran War. With additional soldiers for their army no longer needed, the conversion camps were dismantled, and any survivors were simply exterminated by the Chimera whenever found. Mankind was reduced to a few scattered communities. If any hope remained in victory, it would be found in one of these last isolated pockets of humanity.
That was a bleak ending. Humans were almost entirely eradicated, but I've seen the Chimera video, which shows that eventually humans did manage to destroy the portal and win, but yeah, the original Chimeran war ended in defeat, it would seem, and what was it, over 90% of the human population was destroyed or converted, and after that the Chimera didn't need to convert anymore, so just eradicate what you could. Really damn bleak, but also really damn awesome. I said it throughout the video, I really love the designs of all these weapons, and yeah, the idols also had a cool design, so kudos to that. What I find most interesting thing about the Chimera is that they're not, over the top powerful from the get go. First, they appeared in Russia, where it was cold and they could survive, and they actually had to overcome their weakness of heat and of warmer climate and stuff like that. Which they didn't explain how they did it. They might have mentioned it in the Chimera video, but I have a shit memory, so. And even though their strength lies in that they convert soldiers from everyone captured, and human numbers were plenty, so it's easy for them to replenish troops than humans have. So, and yet they have a higher level of technology. They work in unison while humans are scattered, and while they were pretty damn epic defenses, but here and there, mostly the humans just lost. But again, eventually humans would find a way to close the breach, and yeah. Anyway, what do you guys think? Write your thoughts down below. Visit my reaction, drop a comment, like, subscribe if you want, and I will see you in another video.